Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the strategic planning for June 1st, 2021 at 6 p.m. today. Call to order. The law director, I don't believe we need to have a roll call vote, right? This is just a committee as a whole.
Correct.
All right. Item number 2 is the business of the meeting. 2 items on the agenda. The first item is the matter of the Elyria Trail Connector in partnership with Lorain County Health. Assistant Safety Service Director Ren Flanders, if you want to come up and kind of explain, this was kind of, we had the miscommunication on last Wednesday and we're trying to finalize this so this can get taken care of.
Thank you, through you, Mr. President. So again, we're just asking for funds to be allocated for a connector trail through the North Coast Inland Trail that would bypass the Leo Bullocks Parkway Bridge and provide a connection from Woodford Avenue. To fund this project, we have a $40,000 reimbursable grant from Lorain County Public Health that would leave an additional $60,000 for a remaining phase of the project. Our recommendation for this for funding, as I shared on the last meeting, we will continue to look for additional grant funds to fund this trail project. However, outside of that, and until that point, our recommendation would be that funds for this trail be allocated from the roughly $1.4 million of unallocated funds through the Issue 6 Parks line item. We just think that's an appropriate line item due to it being a trail, increased connectivity, and think that since there are remaining unallocated dollars, that would be appropriate usage for them. We would ask that if this is approved, that it would be, or passed, that it would be passed as an emergency under suspension of rules to ensure that we meet necessary deadlines, and are able to get the phase 1 of this project done by that September 15 deadline of this year. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may,
Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Ms. Flanders, for the benefit of those on council who were not at the meeting last week, could you just explain a little bit about the trail, where it's going to be, the purpose of it going forward? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Through you, Councilwoman. So this trail project would be a connector, again, from that North Coast Inland Trail to bypass the Leo Bullocks Bridge. This was kind of collected under an assessment through the Active Transportation Plan and some of our surveying and conversation with residents. It was a high priority project as a part of that plan. Really from residents, it's going to help them bypass that icy bridge to get to the trail. It increases connectivity for residents on our south side, thereby creating a pathway on Woodford Avenue. It would be, I don't have my exact spec sheet in front of me, but I believe it would be a 10-foot all-purpose trail, really similar to the materials that are currently on that trail. If we got to the, if it was approved, we would likely need for the finalized trail easements on property that we already have existing easements for utility. We don't anticipate any challenges there. As a part of this, again, this would be in partnership with Lorain County Public Health. It would be a reimbursable grant and the catalyst for the Active Transportation Plan starting to get into motion.
Okay, very good. Let's get it on the floor. I know this is kind of a little bit unique to what we're doing here. We consider the matter of an Elyria Trail Connector in partnership with Lorain County Public Health. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to utilize funds from the development, design, construction of phase 1 of the connector trail, which will run along the right-of-way of Woodford Avenue. If I'm going to be saying this right, to the law director and to committee chair, funds would be utilized coming from the issue 6 0.5%.
The Parks budget.
Budget.
I would defer to Finance Director Pileski on this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, apparently that's where they're requesting the money to be appropriated in the 2016.50% income tax fund. And if it is a reimbursement, then we will just repay that fund when the reimbursement came in.
Very good.
However, I think you need to amend the permanent appropriation. I don't believe it's appropriated as of yet, so.
Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the auditor, Mr. Pileski. $40,000 of the project is reimbursable, but then phase 2, I believe, is $60,000, which is not reimbursable.
Okay.
So we'll have to appropriate that as well. Am I correct, Ms. Flanders?
We're doing both phases right at the same time, or? Okay. So you'd have to amend the appropriation for $100,000. Is that what?
All right, with that.
And that, of course, would have to be by ordinance.
Okay. So I think what we'll do, since we thought maybe we could handle that at tonight's meeting, as far as making the appropriation, I don't think we're prepared to have that at this particular time, right? And we can do that.
I assume it's not appropriated, correct?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the money is currently not appropriated in the parks funding. So as Ms. Flanders and as the finance director said, it would have, the full $100,000 would have to be appropriated from the unappropriated dollars into the parks line item for this project. So the full $100,000 would have to be appropriated by council through councilmatic action. As long as, Mr. Chairman, if council pleases, as long as it's done by Monday evening, next Monday evening, we will hit the deadline to apply for this. But 40,000 of the 100,000 would be reimbursable back to the issue 6 line item.
Okay. So just so that we're clear, in order for this to happen for tonight's meeting, we would appropriate that, make that appropriation changes, have that in front of us for June 7th meeting.
Correct. You would pass the committee report through this
Yes.
committee, and then it would pass by full council.
So that we would have to do a strategic planning at 6:30 on the 7th?
Well, through you, Mr. President, and again, Mr. Pileski, I would defer to you. I mean, the appropriations would be standing, so my office and Mr. Pileski's could get the necessary information together, and we could get a proposed legislation on the appropriations together and get that ordinance as a companion legislation piece together, and they could both go forward for full council to consider at the June 7th meeting.
Yes. Very good, and then we'll call that meeting. Thank you, Ms. Flanders. We'll have the discussion afterwards and make sure we have all our ducks in a row prior to the June 7th meeting to get this passed and meet the deadline, required deadline for June the 7th.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let me start by saying tonight there was a little bit of a miscommunication between myself and the mayor when he had kind of talked about maybe calling a special meeting in himself in regard to American Recovery Plan Act funds. And what we're trying to discuss here was a strategic planning meeting to handle a committee meeting, what was just discussed here prior to in that. And the dialogue tonight that we wanted to have for the American Rescue Plans Act was, what does it mean? What is the actual dollars that we have coming into the city that was passed by the federal government? What does that mean for our city now? What does that mean for our city moving forward in the future? And there's going to be more dialogue, but I know that he wanted to have, and we welcome you to Elyria City Council chambers. I think we're all at that place in time where we're ready to remove our masks and move on to our normalcy of life as best we can to moving forward. So, but this is a great opportunity for the city of Elyria, and you know, to get projects or opportunities that we can do in the short term, but really looking out for us as a city in the long term, and using these funds wisely and to where it's going to benefit everybody. And with that, I'm going to segue to the mayor for his comments. Mayor Whitfield.
Thank you, Council President, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Are we able to turn the monitor on so that folks can see the presentation? Corey, around? I'll kind of talk through as we're prepping for that, but Corey, if you could get the screen turned on so folks can see the presentation. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. It's so great to see all the residents here to be a part of this discussion tonight. This opportunity is a very unique opportunity the city of Elyria has. I think it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity we have to really make some key investments in the city that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we'll be proud of the decisions we made in these next few weeks. So we'll start off kind of giving some overview of the American Rescue Plan and kind of some of those key areas where we feel like there's an opportunity for the city. Then we'll talk about some of the opportunities that we see as an administration, some of the priorities we have that we see aligned with the American Rescue Plan. Then we'll share the feedback we got from you all. So we issued out a survey, Council President, last week, and we've gotten over 300 responses to that survey in terms of what residents are looking for usage of this money. So we'll talk about the findings in that. And then we just want to have some open dialogue in terms of, what are City Hall's priorities. As you know, as I'm learning, a lot of these conversations have to happen in a public forum. And so a part of the purpose of today is for us to have a conversation about these resources in a public forum. So we'll be as sensitive as we can to things that are sensitive and confidential, and we'll be as transparent as we can for things that aren't. And so I'm ready to get started. Ms. Phillips, were we able to get the screen going? Okay, just to get it up on here. Turn the monitor on. If not, I think, Mark, are you in here? You know how to do it? Okay. Because it's not really going to be helpful without seeing the PowerPoint presentation. How'd you go?
Here's Corey.
Appreciate your patience. Thank you, Corey. So here's what we know so far about the American Rescue Plan. We know it was signed into law March 11th. They had 100 days to make the funds available to cities. And a part of that American Rescue Plan, $350 billion was allocated to municipalities and states to address our pandemic recovery. The Treasury so far has issued a 155-page document that's considered interim rule. So would encourage any resident, any council person, as you look through those rules, that guidance, if there's anything missing, that you provide that feedback to them. Also know that there's dialogue right now at the Fed level about potentially clawing back these resources from cities. That conversation is happening right now about, asking for this money back. So I think if you have any influence with any legislators at the Fed level, to make sure you let them know that our city needs these resources, as you'll hear later on in this presentation. So we know before the American Rescue Plan, we were already in recovery mode as a city. We know, we were heading into office knowing that we were already facing income tax revenue loss through the loss of two of our major employers. And then the pandemic hit. And that made things a lot more challenging for us. And so throughout last year, we continued to monitor what our revenue was based on the economic impacts of the pandemic. We streamlined some processes. We started cross-training staff. We found ways to do more with less. We continued to stay focused on our economic plan and to try to rebuild our economy by investing in entrepreneurship, attracting employers through our workforce, and trying to grow the companies that are here. So we got a couple wins last year with Invacare, with Crane. Thanks to City Council, we were able to get the Skill City Initiative up and running. So we got a couple wins last year that started on the process, but we still had in the back of our minds about this looming drop that we were going to face in income tax revenue from the pandemic. So, you know, some of the potential pitfalls we have in utilizing these funds, in my opinion, is we can rush to allocate and spend these funds as quickly as possible, which I think that we can make some haste makes waste, as my great aunt would say. We can treat these funds as another initiative that's separate from things that we've already identified as priorities. So, i.e., these funds become a distraction from our priorities as a city. We can leverage these funds to make key investments that allow us to free up other resources to address other priorities that we have as a city. And we can utilize these funds only to plug holes in the city's budget. So I just want to kind of paint that picture that there's multiple ways that we can approach the utilization of these funds. Our thought is to recognize that these are one-time funds, use them to stabilize our operations while making catalytic investments in our city, including our economy and our community. So we've identified some priority areas, and this was a part of the survey we put out. The first one was addressing this issue of revenue loss, which Director Pileski, I'm going to ask you to speak to in a minute, just in terms of the numbers you sent me earlier. But addressing that revenue loss, so making sure our staff is being adequately paid and that we can keep adequate staffing. Investing in key areas that are going to spur economic and community recovery. So how can we invest this money in areas where, again, 10 years from now, we're seeing a return on that investment? How do we invest in organizations that serve our residents, whether that's with financial assistance? We know with the unemployment benefits ending here soon, with the mortgage issues that people are going to have, the rent issues people are going to have, we're going to need to continue to provide financial assistance. And how do we invest in this whole social recovery aspect, especially for our youth and families? So as was mentioned, stabilizing and optimizing city services is something that is called out specifically in the ARP funding, that these resources can be used to address revenue loss. And the baseline number for that revenue is using the year-end amount from 2019. So that's our baseline number, which our general fund was around $30 million as our baseline just in that one line item. But we know that these are the funds that allow our police, fire, parks, our courts. This is that general fund money that really keeps those things going, our city services. But in 2020, one thing I want to make sure is clear that, we don't think that we should just use this money as waste and just like, all right, well, now let's stop trying to manage people. Let's stop looking for efficiencies. Let's stop trying to optimize operations because we don't need to save money. We still want to take the mindset of let's still look for efficiency. Let's still try to optimize operations. Let's cross-train staff. Let's still look for ways that we can save funds. So we know through the changes we made in 2020, we were able to save over $2 million just looking at overtime and other issues within the city. And so we want to make sure we're not just jumping right back and losing those savings, but looking for those efficiencies. But I did want to allow Director Pileski to speak to the projections that we believe are eligible right now for these funds in terms of the amount of revenue loss.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mr. President. So there's a formula that's in the Rescue Plan Act, and it basically I had to come up with the base revenue, which would, as the mayor spoke, would have been the revenue from 2019, and this does not include all revenues. You have to go through and look at all your revenue sources, all your revenue line items, and then you have to compute what they call a counterfactual revenue, which is the base revenue times 1 plus the growth rate over the last 3 years, or 4.14%, I believe it was, that's stated in the Act, times that number to the power of n divided by 12. So I had to look, brush my algebra mind off a little bit to get through this formula. But so it turns out that the counterfactual revenue number turned out to be $46,122,755. The actual revenue for 2020 was $40,584,099, which shows a loss of $5,542,256, and that would be distributed amongst several funds because I had to look at all the general fund, the street construction maintenance repair fund because of gasoline tax, the state highway fund, all the special muni court funds because fines were way down in 2020. So of the $5,542,256, roughly 63.79% would go into the general fund and so on down the line. So I'm going to revisit this formula again just to make sure all the numbers are strong. But that's what I have right now, $5,542,256, comparing the counterfactual revenue to the actual revenue of 2020.
Thank you, Director Pileski. So I think you can see from that picture, 5.5 mil, that this is, we don't talk about it a lot, but we're still facing it this year. So we're even trending down this year because we're still facing some of those economic impacts of the pandemic. So I think it's important to note that a part of these resources, we think it's a priority to make sure we shore up our budget so that we're not laying folks off, that people continue to work, that it doesn't just go out the door. The next piece is really how do we use these resources to catalyze economic development. So one of the things we know, the ARP really calls out industries that were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, including tourism. And we know prior to the pandemic, we had 10,000 plus people visiting downtown every day to handle business. And so how can these resources be utilized to catalyze more economic growth and really capitalize on this tourism opportunity, which includes stabilizing our historic building stock that we have. We've had conversations with the metro parks about continuing to develop our waterfront, and how do we start to invest in new businesses to fill those vacancies downtown in the square, and that will attract visitors downtown. The next area is around investing in small business. So I'm going to defer to Dawn Calvert, who leads our economic development and transformation work, to speak to what she's seen in terms of the small business needs that are in the market right now.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. We have been having a lot of conversations with the business community across industry sectors, mostly focused on small business, to get some ideas on what the needs are today and how we can best serve them, potentially through this ARP money that we're getting. So a couple of areas that have come up are the continuing need for not necessarily COVID response, how we saw it at the beginning of the pandemic with masks and partitions and that kind of thing, but the continued need for reconfiguring operations. And sometimes that means things like marketing or, getting online, ordering services done, that kind of thing. So that need still exists. So we could potentially use these funds very similarly to how we did when we got the CARES Act money, and we helped about just under 25 businesses with that $500,000 pool of funds to reconfigure operations and also address immediate needs. We could continue to do something like that. We also have uncovered, as the mayor mentioned, downtown is a priority. We hear that by and large, even from businesses who aren't located in downtown, that downtown is very much a priority. We've done a lot to help spur investment there, but there are still some gaps. So mainly we hear a lot on the need for soft costs for people investing in buildings, which includes architectural costs, engineering costs, and then also leasehold improvements. So people who aren't necessarily buying the building but would like to put a bakery or something like that in a downtown location but can't quite afford to make those leasehold improvements to get the floor plan and the building code and that kind of thing to work for how they need it to be. Safety and beautification are also big concerns we hear for downtown. I know that all of you on council field those calls on occasion where trash needs to be picked up, or the sidewalk is a little bit uneven, or we just need to improve the appearance of downtown to help draw more people there. And then the perception of safety. We know downtown is actually pretty safe compared to other parts of the city, but there is a perception that safety is a concern. So that's another thing that we hear quite a bit. And then for overall throughout the city, so including downtown and other areas, we hear we hear a lot the need for support and help with marketing, how to get the word out about their businesses and services, how to do it. We actually have a lot of businesses in the city who need help with online marketing, using social media to market their products and services. And particularly when we think about how much the world has changed since this pandemic hit us, that's increasingly more important as time goes on. And then lastly, loan approval gaps. So this is particularly around collateral and equity in closing loans. So there is a gap when we have entrepreneurs that want to get loans to run their business, that they don't have the equity to put in to close that deal, or they don't have the collateral. So that's another gap that we're hearing quite a bit of.
Thank you, Director Calvin. I think another piece to that is, this is something Councilman Tollett, I think, had mentioned to me before, just being mindful that we don't duplicate what already exists out there in the market, and I think that's something we want to be very mindful of. What state programs are out there. We know PPP is wrapped up, but, what gaps exist, and having resources available for that. The next area, and thank you for that, Director Calvert. The next area is investing in organizations that serve our residents. So as I mentioned before, the pandemic has really wreaked havoc on a lot of different areas in people's family lives, including financially. And these funds, the guidance is very clear that these funds can be used to serve the needs of mental health, violence prevention, after school and summer camp programming, and financial assistance, which includes rent, mortgage, utility payments, and other supports. So we through the CARES Act, we stood up that program through community development where we solicited grant applications from our community and we vetted them and we got resources out. A lot of them went toward child care last year, but we'd love for that to get opened back up. We feel like we have a system that works, and let's stick with it so that we can get resources out there. This kind of ties into kind of our philosophy around using these resources for infrastructure. So we know that there's dialogue right now at the national level about an infrastructure bill when it comes to water, sewer, bridges, roads, all that good stuff. And that our recommendation, since we're set to get this revenue in two tranches, that we watch and wait and advocate for this infrastructure bill. And if that comes through over the next year, then we would have saved these resources toward other needs that we have in the city versus spending them now, and an infrastructure bill comes and that's so tight that we can't meet needs in the community. But we know with utilities and the increase in water rates that was passed, we know that for some residents it's going to be very difficult to meet those payments. So if we put resources into the Salvation Army or into those nonprofit organizations, it'll be able to assist those who can't afford those higher utility rates. And last but not least, this was something that came out of dialogue again between myself and Councilman Tollett around recreational programming. And it specifically calls out the Treasury that there's a high focus on youth and child care, and as long as it has an educational, mental health, and an evidence-based programming focus to it, that these funds can be utilized for that. So we think this is an opportunity to really come back strong. I think that we've already done a really good job of getting the current Parks and Rec programming out, but there could be opportunities to expand, as well as Councilman, a number of you have mentioned, about how could we offer this free this year for our residents to be able to access the programming. So we think that's another area of investment. So we put out a survey last week. We didn't know what the feedback would be. It was amazing, the response we got. It was very encouraging. There was a couple conspiratorial comments on there, as you can expect from free comments, and so we had to weed through some of those, but that was very few. And for the bulk of them, as you can see, over 50% of all the feedback we got was supportive of those priorities that we laid out, with the highest of those being around Midway Mall and downtown. The residents really want to see us make key investments to turn those areas around. Second to that was around recreational programming and helping our youth recover. And as you can see, third to that was aid to small businesses. Next to that was providing aid to nonprofits to serve our community, and then covering losses in revenue to avoid layoffs among city employees was the least, but still each one of them got over 50%. So this could have came back with 20% or 10%. So it was good to see that we're on the same track, that we're in alignment with most of where the residents who filled out the survey are at, and that was very encouraging. Some of the other concerns that came up, or some of the themes that came up through the comments, was a lot of focus on revitalizing downtown, helping small business. There was a lot around senior assistance in a senior center. Currently, and I think in this interim phase, we have an opportunity to make some comment. There's no mention of seniors in the ARP, which is very weird, because in the last one, they were very specific to make sure that there was a focus on our seniors. So we're going to make sure we provide that feedback to them that, hey, you've missed a population of folks who are drastically impacted by the pandemic. There was some consistency around assisting the schools with like tutoring and literacy. And then there was a lot of comments around just cleaning up the city. A lot of folks just clean up downtown, clean up buildings, clean up. We heard a lot of that and the feedback. So as I mentioned, there's this issue with the Treasury guidance, doesn't mention anything around seniors. We think that needs to be changed. The other thing around infrastructure, we heard that, but again, we think we should wait until this infrastructure bill to see what happens with that. In the meantime, assist our residents with making payments and staying up financially. And then this idea of affordable housing development also is a concern and an opportunity we think needs to be explored. So what we've heard from council so far has been around home rehabilitation, which that is called out specifically in the Treasury guidance. I know Councilman Oswald, that's been something you've brought up. That is specifically called out in here. As I mentioned, Councilman Saletta, around the recreational programming, we think that through the language that talks about emotional, social, educational, that these resources can be used for that. We've also heard loud and clear just to be mindful of duplication of programs and resources. So we're talking with the state. We're also talking with our county commissioners as well to make sure we engage with them and see how they're utilizing their funds. And then we wanted to provide this open forum to kind of talk with you all about what other ideas you have. You know, we know our role as an administration is to present a budget to you, but ultimately it's your job to approve it. So we wanted to provide an open space for that and hear what you think. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for the information. And for those who residents did do the feedback, I'm sure it's still continuous, that they can kind of still participate in with that. One question I did have is in regards to, with our increased water rates and what we're having to come up through with the US EPA in compliance with them. Is this something that would move the needle that we should consider, using some of these dollars for that to help with our residents' costs because of the increase of these rates that are forthcoming now and then in the future, that we have to kind of stay on task with them? I don't know if you're prepared to answer that, or
yes, I am.
Mr. Corzan can answer.
Yes, because we've looked into that. I've had the Director Plesky and I, I've met with engineering. This is something we've thought about a lot. Is, again, the water rates have always been something that's a focus of ours. I think the consensus is this is just a drop in the bucket because it's a $40 million project, and I'll let other folks speak to it, but a $40 million project, that this would just be a drop in the bucket for it. And that what we can do alternatively is really, again, look at this infrastructure bill, try to make sure we have shovel-ready projects to present there, assist our residents with paying their utility bills now for those who can't afford it. And, we're also applying for grants all the time for this. They brought earmarks back, so we're lobbying our congressional folks to try to add one of our sewer projects into the budget for earmarks. So there's other ways we think we can get there, but we think with this limited amount of resources, though it is a lot to us in terms of a city service standpoint, when you start talking infrastructure, this is a drop in the bucket in that big grand scheme. So that was my takeaway from my dialogues with engineering, with the finance director as well, but I'll let them share as well.
Law Director Deary.
Thank you, through you, Mr. President. I've had several conversations with the wet weather program team as well, engineering, Mr. Corzan, our consultants with AECom, our special counsel, Attorney Wendy Levy. I don't have the answer as far as strict numbers, much like the mayor said, but I did want to do my due diligence on behalf of council and because this does rarely come along. It's a bit of a unicorn, so to speak. Rarely does federal funding like this come along and specifically state that permissible use is water and sewer. And as you know, our sewer rates are of concern to residents. I'm a resident. You all are residents. You hear from residents. And because of the 20-plus year project that we're finding ourselves in, courtesy of the federal government, and that's all I'll say about that. Rates are going to continue to be a hardship on many of our residents. It is something that I would urge and recommend council to look into further, because this is potentially a once-in-a-lifetime experience opportunity. It may be a drop in the bucket. It may not be a drop in the bucket. I know the next project, as indicated to me by the team, is a $10 million project. Anything that we are able to put into these projects that we do not have to borrow, as indicated by my conversations with Finance Director Pileski, will help us out. Our rates compound each year. As you know, we had a 15% increase overall system-wide last year, and we had a 15% one this year. And obviously, we're doing everything in our power as a team to not continue in that fashion, but it's a very real problem, and it's my job to advise all of you. And so it's something I would like to see that you not take off the table, although I understand that needs are many, and money is not infinite. But it's something that I certainly would not like to see be dismissed quite so handily. I understand that there is an infrastructure bill that's making its way through Congress, but we all know how that can be, and this is money that's right here, right now. And so that's my more than 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you, Law Director Deary, for the information. I think that should be just kind of taken in to advisement when we're making these decisions as far as these dollars go. Anything that's going to help our residents saving some costs, and if it's going to move the needle a little bit to help everybody out, we should look into that. With that being said, Engineer Schneider, did you want to weigh in on what the mayor's comments were and projects?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We did look at some of the numbers. Obviously, this is all still a work in progress, but one of the that was, right now we're estimating just under 6% increases for a number of years still. And what that equates to is roughly $925,000 increase a year in total revenue spread out across everyone. The problem with that is it is a compounding factor. So you do it this year, it stays on for the next 30 years. You're looking, so $1 million doesn't really go too far. We also looked at if $1 million was placed in there, how would it affect the rate? It could decrease it down maybe 0.5% over, let's say, a 10-year period, but then you'd be back to roughly where you were as estimated before. So, as the mayor said, it doesn't create a big, doesn't move the needle a lot. So, that's all I wanted to
weigh in on that. Okay. Mr. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Engineer Schneider. Just to put in perspective, how many hundreds of millions of dollars are we looking to have to do in projects over the next 20 or 30 years?
Well, I can tell you the overall plan is over $200 million.
Right.
How much? I mean, we're quite a ways into it, but we're not that far. So
I think it's important to see this enormous figure in front of us, and it's a daunting task. And again, the mayor made reference to a drop in the bucket, and this great opportunity I have with these funds is fantastic, but versus a $200 million slate of projects over the next 20 years, it is what it is.
Hopefully the infrastructure bill will pass and we'll get a lot of money.
Yeah, right. Very good. Again, I think that's information, and Mayor, I don't know, or is there information that we can share with us, wet weather program, the timelines that the federal government has kind of put us on to meet these requirements and deadlines. I think that's information that the general public has to understand what we're up against and trying to be in compliance with them. And really the need for what we've just talked about is this infrastructure bill that's going to help offset some of those costs. So I think it's just continued dialogue with that. Engineer Center, anything more in regards to
No, Mr. President.
projects? Very good. Any questions for Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President. Now, in the past, we've done road projects like Cleveland Street, Broad Street. We've had to come up with so much funds. We get matching funds. With this money, that could be our matching funds. Is there going to be many of those programs by chance that could get us over the top with some of our money?
Through you, Mr. President, this ARPS money cannot be used as matching funds. Federal money cannot be used as matching funds on state projects. Fair. I didn't write the rules. Just pass. Don't shoot the messenger.
Very good. Mr. Gillette.
Through you, Mr. President. First thing to the audience that's here tonight, it's awesome to see you. It's wonderful. It makes my heart almost as happy as seeing many of you yesterday along the parade. That was incredible. So everyone understands these payments, we're receiving two payments. One that we just received and one a year from now. If everyone doesn't understand that. And it's roughly Mr. Pileski, about 9.15 million.
9.3.
9.3 million. And so we know right off the bat that we can use 5.5 million of that 9.3 to reimburse ourselves for what we lost due to the pandemic. So in year one, we're looking how do we spend those funds? Now, here's a question I have for Mr. Pileski. Can we earmark year two funds in 2021 before we receive it?
Good question. I would say you cannot appropriate it because we may not get it. According to the mayor, they're already looking to pull back some of the money that's going to cities, so we may not get.
Okay.
So I would say you can certainly discuss what we can do with next year's allowance or, money, but we don't know exactly what it's going to be.
Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking about a long-term potential parks project where the residents made it very clear during the mayor's sessions that additional hiking trails and recreation opportunities are something they want. I didn't know if we could earmark some of next year's funds toward that, if we're allowed to do that. So that's something we'll dig into a little bit later.
Yeah. And one other thing, the act allows to revisit lost revenue again at the end of this year and at the end of 2022. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll have, we'll lose more revenue this year. Income tax revenues are starting to rebound, but the act does allow us to revisit lost revenue.
22's revenue.
Right.
So if we potentially...
So the revenue that we get this year can be plugged into the formula to see if we lost revenue again in 2021 and in 2022. We don't have to do that, obviously, but
we could do that to potentially draw another 5.5 million.
Correct.
Okay. The other thing, if any of you read the Chronicle from Mrs. Sawerka, she made a very valid point about things like dressing up the train trestles that are they're hideous in our town. They've been that way for years. That type of a program is something that we do need to sit tight, see what happens with this infrastructure bill, that we know right now there's a fight going on, of course, between Democrats and Republicans We know that the budget set right now is going to be between $1 trillion and $1.7 trillion on infrastructure. But in both their plans, in the infrastructure bills, it does include highways and railroads. So for us to go that direction with ARP funds right now, we don't want to dedicate these funds for a project like that when we could be able to get funds through, if it passes, when it passes, through the infrastructure bill. So there's a lot of challenges with this. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tolet. Law Director Deary, looks like you wanted to weigh in on something.
Thank you. Just so everybody's on the same page, the clock has begun as far as spending this money. That started at the beginning of March of this year. But unlike the CARES Act money, these funds must be encumbered by the end of the calendar year of 2024. They must be spent by the end of the calendar year of 2026. So somewhat to answer your question, Mr. Tolet, there can be planning, although not necessarily formal appropriations before we see this next set of money.
Correct.
But there is definitely some time for administration and council to do planning and to decide how specifically this money is going to be spent, and if need be, to reallocate. Everything that needs to be set in stone needs to be done by December 31st of 2024. But even still, then there's an additional 2 years to spend that money, even if it's been planned for.
Thank you, Law Director Deary. Mayor Whitfield.
Yeah, through you, Council President. So to Director Deary's point, I think that's part of why we are proposing that council consider the fact that these funds don't have to spend up 2024 or be encumbered. But there's some immediate needs we think we should look at, but then not feel the pressure that we got to allocate the whole $9 million now and the whole $9 million next year. But what are those immediate needs, which we think the revenue loss, the small business support, the recreational programming, and the social service are immediate needs, and we have the infrastructure to be able to address while we start looking at these more catalytic projects that long-term will pay dividends.
Thank you, Mayor. Anybody on council have anything more to weigh in regards to what was presented by the mayor, or have a comment or a question that, Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the mayor. I know that we're doing all of our senior programming right now at South, and I believe I read the comment because South has air conditioning and West and East don't. So what would the cost be, and this is something to look into adding air conditioning to those facilities? I think that would be a great use of those funds.
Yeah, I really thank you for that. And through you, President, Councilwoman Mitchell, I think we have such a great opportunity because, when we think about how we utilize Issue 6 funds, how we utilize general fund like this, we can really take a step back and just ask ourselves, what do we need as a city? And then we just do the matchmaking between myself and the finance department and figure out how we make it happen and then bring that back to you, and that's why we just kind of, a couple weeks ago, I did that investment priority presentation to y'all just to kind of here's what we're seeing are the priorities, let's figure out how to mix and match the senior center thing. We see that nothing in the ARP speaks to that, but that doesn't mean we can't now free up other resources now to do that because these resources are covering something else. So it just comes down to us just getting on the same page together, blocking out divisiveness and just really focusing on the long term for the city, taking personalities out of it. And I think 20 years from now, we'll be proud of the decisions we made in the next, year or so. So that's what I'm proposing, and that's why I wanted to make sure we just had a format and a forum to talk about it.
Thank you. Yep. Any other council members have anything to weigh in on? Okay. Is there anybody here in the general Ms. Davis?
Through you, Mr. Chair. And my concern is, I keep hearing you say that, we can take some of the money and put it to Salvation Army to help people pay their water bills and so forth. But when you got a senior and then they might just not qualify, whereas Salvation Army, what your standards are saying, they just living on a budget. And so I feel for our seniors, and I don't want them to lose out, that they have to go to the Salvation Army and apply for this when they may be $2 over what you say they should be. And so we should, you know, really be concerned about our seniors and paying these water bills. So, and I hope we do come on the same page to come and help with the seniors with this, and they don't have to go there. When you say that, then you want people to be in the rearage 2 or 3 months in the water bill. Seniors don't do that. They try to pay their water bills, and they shouldn't have to wait 3 or 4 months to go and get money to help them along. They're missing something from food to make sure that their water bill is paid on time and don't have to go down there. So I hope we do come to a happy medium with our seniors and helping them with this water bill.
Yep. Through you, President. Thank you for that, Councilwoman Davis. And we had that dialogue earlier just about seniors being left behind and kind of in that middle space. And, you know, there's programs, we talked about like the homestead program and things like that, how seniors can apply to the city to demonstrate they're on a fixed income and then their rate is reduced. So we'll look at every creative way to make sure we're not doing unnecessary steps for people. And like, I love the picture you just painted about why wait till you get 3 months in the rear to ask for assistance. If we know it, how can we, so we can have that conversation with the Salvation Army to say, hey, let's get ahead of this. Let's not wait until they're in the rears. How can they apply now? And just we build that into the program.
Mr. Gillette.
Through you, Mr. President. And I think this is towards the mayor. Also receiving a tremendous amount of money was the state of Ohio. So much money that they moved a portion of their disbursements to developmental disabilities, who are actually doing disbursements for rental assistance, cash payments, food, a lot of items. I'm going to jump to another thing real quick on that. A year ago, we hired a consultant to seek grants for us. Could that same consulting firm and what they do dig in with the state of Ohio to cover issues like water bills and use their funds instead of our funds if they're available to our residents? That may allow us to offer more downtown programs or more park options or whatever it may be. I'll turn it over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Through you, President. I think that's the beauty of collaboration when you're working with these outside agencies like the Salvation Army, is that they are able, if we do it, it's just our money that does it. If they do it, they can get money from the county, they can get money from us, they can get money from the state. That money that came through the state actually went through the community action agencies last time. And so, yeah, I think that's a part of where our community development team is going to need to work closely with these and be very savvy on the resources that are available. So again, we just are very mindful of that duplication of services and how do we collaborate. So that's definitely top of mind for us.
Good, very good. Okay, I know we have residents over and through here. Oh, Mr. Corzine, did you want to weigh in on? Mr. Corzine, if you could please state your name, just so that everyone knows.
Terry Corzine, Superintendent, City of Elyria Wastewater, 1194 Gulf Road. Just as we're talking about assistance to homeowners and residents and that, I just want to make sure everybody's mindful of the fact that there's a House resolution going through right now. Don't know how far it's going to get and don't know how it's going to change, but the intent of the resolution on the federal level is to make a permanent source of funding for homeowners, whether it's for rent, whether it's for utility bills, anything like that. So all this stuff here that's coming out now, like with the ARP funds and that, this is a temporary stuff, same thing as the CARES Act before. But the House resolution that's going through now and is being discussed could make this type of funding permanent for homeowner assistance. So when we talk about, you know, these projects going out the next 25 years or so, and that's something that we all want to fight for, you know, because, you know, as time goes on, homeowners and residents are going to need that type of assistance to deal with rate increases that are going to happen to stay in compliance with the EPA regulations. So Unfortunately, I don't have that resolution number with me, but I can certainly get it to you.
Thank you for that insight. I think that's knowledge that we're going to be able to use. And again, it's another case of possible duplication of service, but it's just time that, the more information that we have, the better that we're all going to be, and to share that with everybody. Thank you, Mr. Corzan. With that being said, I know that we have obviously a lot of people here in the council chambers. If you'd like to come up, state your name and address for the record, and just kind of maybe weigh in on some things, but we'll be limited to the amount of people that are coming in. And I spoke with the mayor earlier that, maybe this is going to be a series of, maybe we refer to it as a town hall meeting to where we can just kind of gain that momentum, what people are really kind of engaged for. So. Marty, maybe make sure your mic is on down below. The green button.
It's on.
Please state your name.
My name is Marty Martinez. I live at 358 BB Avenue. Just real quick, I'm not really a detail man, so I kind of turned off some of the detail. And what I understand overall, what we should be looking at is short-term solutions for long-term results, not a one-time solution for a temporary result. And as an example, when you think of downtown, I'll use downtown as an example. Look for a business that wants a building, and then we invest in that building for that business and help them to grow. And that's just an example. But I think you should be focusing on a short-term solution for a long-term solution result, not a one-time solution that's temporary, because that's really a waste of the monies. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure thing. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Again, we're going to have probably a number of series of meetings, town halls, I guess that's what we would call it, and really take all the information in and gather it, and ultimately what's going to be best for the community, again, in the short term and then ultimately in the long term. So is there anybody else at this particular time who just kind of wants to come up and just say a few words in regards to what's being talked about in this initial presentation? Come on up, Mr. Klipstein, and then there's a woman that would kind of raise her hand up before you. If you allowed her to go in front of you there, that'd be great. Please state your name and address for the record.
Brenda Warren. I live at 436 10th Street, Elyria, Ohio. I'm standing before you because I did take the opportunity to peruse that 160-some page proposal, and there were several things that came to mind that I jotted down. And I think that they speak not only to me, but to also some things that you might want to consider in your deliberations about how you're going to spend this money. One of the things that stayed with me was that whether and how does the use respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency. I think those are the parameters in which this bill or this act was written, and I think that those are things we need to keep in mind when we're considering how we're going to spend it. So I went on to look at just a couple of things. I'm not going to be long. And I thought that out of it, we came the idea that we need to provide funds to households, businesses, and nonprofits in communities most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. I went on to look at a couple of things that says assistance to the unemployed worker, assistance to households, referring to cash transfers, small businesses, grants to mitigate financial hardships, etc. And the final couple of things I looked at was addressing educational disparities in evidence-based education services and practices, and evidence-based practices to address the social, emotional, mental needs of our students. I could go on because I did do a good job of taking notes, but my just a comment to you is let's not lose sight of the parameters in which we can actually spend this money.
Thank you, Ms. Warren. Mr. Mr. Klipstein, please state your name and address for the record.
Larry Klipstein, 959 Oakwood Drive, Elyria, Ohio. I do think you're going to need several meetings right now. I mean, like the mayor said, haste makes waste. It's probably going to be down the road before you get around to spending this money, because I, for one, would also like to wait to see what the federal government's going to do with the transportation bills as far as bridges, with the project me and Don and Mitchell talked about last year on 113, cleaning up that bridge that they put in with the guardrails and that. I think a lot of this money should also be spent on the youth organizations and the nonprofits. We need programs for children with special needs like autism and learning disabilities and things like that. Right now, I don't think the city has a general place they can go and have the trained instructors or recreational facilities for kids with needs. You know, we can't assume that every kid in the city is going to take advantage of everything that we have, because some of them can't. I know we now have the old Oakwood School, which people are talking about making into a state shining star. And I think this facility we could put some money into off this COVID money to help start up some of those programs. It's close to West Rec. It's a centralized location. The rooms are there. We just need to use that school for what it is and have more senior programs, more kids with special needs programs, and possibly down the road get better recreation centers. I, for one, would love to see a centralized recreation center one day, but I don't know if the city would ever do that. A lot of people are complaining because 2 sides have swimming pools, 2 sides don't. I think the pool should be a whole city thing. If you can have a central location with a couple pools and get people to it, that would also benefit. But let's not forget the youth, because the youth is what's going to make the city great in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Klipstein. Gentleman in the back, if you want to please come up, state your name and address for the record.
Greetings, Council, City Council, and the Mayor. My name is Eric Bowens. My address is 1212 Lake Avenue, and I am here representing South T-Ball and South Park in general. I would love to see the city focus on, and I don't want to call the South Side the weakest link of the city, but it seems like it's getting the less attention, so I will call it the weakest link of the city. And I feel like in order to grow the city, we need to start with the weakest link and go from there. We have over 80 children in youth T-ball right now. We're bringing out more than 200 parents and family and loved ones out to support the children. We do have some children on our teams that are suffering from autism, so we have some great coaches, and I would love to see the city invest back into the community of the South Side. We want to see expansion of baseball fields, possibly softball fields, and we do want the South Side, I can't speak for the West Side, but I'm speaking for the South Side, to have their own swimming pool. We don't want any more than anyone else, but we don't want any less than anyone else. So I'm here representing the South Side and resources for South Park and growing that area and building from there. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your comments.
Name's Jason Lowry, 149 Timber Ridge, Elyria, Ohio. Number one thing that should be done with this money, everybody has to consider ROI. Return on investment is the most important thing. Pools are great, rec centers are great, youth organizations great. Yes, we need all that. Nobody's arguing that. Rental assistance, mortgage assistance, utility assistance, it's great. Everybody needs help, that's fine. But in the long term, when you're using this money and you're spending these funds, what is it bringing back to help the rest of the city? So, building another pool, is there a return on investment in that? Somewhat, but bringing in business for tax revenue, that's ROI. Those are the things that need to be looked at, not, new crosswalks and flower pots. Beautification is great. We all want it. That's fine. But this is a one-time opportunity to use money to actually improve the city long-term, not short-term. So everything that's decided fund-wise needs to be prioritized and what the actual return on investment is, as opposed to what this group, or this group wants. So return on investment, most important.
Thank you.
Hello, Council. My name is Greg Jones. My address is 620 Nelson Street, Elyria. And I've heard a lot about water bills and nothing about the other utilities, gas and electric, and the comfort that residents need to address in their homes. That's my particular business, energy efficiency. And we can do more than one thing with this money. And I think the city is only as strong as the residents that live in it are, and as comfortable as they are. I'd like to have some of this money put towards, I don't know if you have other community services other than the Salvation Army, but other areas where you can address energy efficiency and comfort in the residents' homes, which would reduce their utility costs, their utilities bills, savings across the board. And I think doing this in some form would also address the health of the city as a whole, seniors as well as individuals. And you have a great program here, but I think it's being underutilized, which is the Neighborhood Pride program. But like any program, it's only as good as the people that can use it. And we don't have enough education being put into that process because with the program and Columbia Gas as assistant, you can really do a lot to these homes at little or no cost. And some residents could use that quite a bit. So I think we should look at addressing this so that the comfort of the entire city and the residents can be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I know that the Columbia Gas does offer a program where they come in and they would evaluate the homes, do a test of some sort, and at that time an evaluation, and then at that point they'll blow in insulation or something along those lines to kind of reduce those costs. And that's something that maybe we could, if we have that on our website, is to continue to inform our residents in regards to that opportunity for them. Anybody else? Mr. Baird.
Yeah, just as a wrap up, I think this is a good meeting. It's good to see the people turn out, put out their opinions. I think the mayor and his staff have put together a plan that makes sense to start it, and I think it's a step in the right direction. As Mr. Clipsign said, it's going to take a few to get all of these things together, but I think as we work together moving forward, we're going to come up with some good decisions. I trust the city council, I trust the mayor, and with the input from you citizens for what's important, we're looking at the financial end of it. As Mr. Pulaski said, it looks like 5.5 million of the 9 million, 9.3 million, I guess I'll be accurate, is to replace where we lost out is providing our services, which we all enjoy those services each and every day. Talking about comfort when the water goes on and the sewer goes out, that works pretty well. And when sanitation's picked up, we all appreciate it. And I think our employees do an excellent job working toward that. And we want to maintain that for you, for all of us. And so I think we're on the right track, and I think we'll come up with ideas and things that'll make life better here in Elyria. And that's what, being a lifelong Illyrian, that's what we all want, right, Mayor? We're lifelong.
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay.
sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Well, I appreciate everyone coming up tonight. It's good to see everybody again. Brenda, Ms. Davis, you want to make one more comment?
Yes, I do, through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clear up that the gas company, Columbia Gas, you don't have to be the homeowner to get this service. You can be a renter and tell your owner that this is offered and they can get the service. So to help the ones that are renting, the Columbia Gas also will do the installation if you're a renter.
I think that if they call the community development office, I think they can share that information with them to get the necessary documents or setting up the protocols that need to make that happen. But again, we appreciate everybody coming here tonight and expressing your views and listening to us, because we need to listen to you and making it important. And we're and we'll have another town hall meeting there, and then we'll kind of coordinate that here soon, just to kind of keep the things moving along to make sure we're being informed about what's going on over there that could be ever changing. So we appreciate that at this particular time. So this meeting will end. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you.